My name is Deborah Hall. I'm 32 years old, and I run a historic ceramic restoration studio in New England. My hands are always stained with grout, my fingernails permanently outlined in tile dust, and there's a silver streak in my dark brown hair that appeared when I was 16. People think it's stylish. I know it's a scar. I was 16 when I learned the exact dimensions of being unwanted. My mother chose my sister because she was delicate and artistic. My father chose my brother because he was logical and useful. My name hung in the silence like a typo no one bothered to correct. 16 years later, they returned. Not with apologies, but with demands for my signature on a $400,000 loan. They didn't know the girl they left to sort out her own foster placement now holds the keys to a National Historic Preservation grant worth $750,000. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been called the strong one by people who used your strength as an excuse to abandon you? It was a Tuesday afternoon in September when my entire family gathered in our Victorian home in Millbrook, Connecticut. I was 16 years old, sitting on the floor of what used to be called the morning room, carefully repairing an antique Delft tile. The tile was pale blue and white, maybe 200 years old, with a hairline crack running through a windmill scene. My maternal grandmother had given it to me to practice on. The tile was cold in my hands. I could hear my parents in the dining room with their lawyers. Their voices had moved past shouting into something worse. The calm, terrifying phase of division. It sounded like a patient dying, that flatline tone of finality. Sophie goes with me. That was my mother's voice. Sharp, decisive, the same voice she used when curating museum exhibitions. Sophie was 10. Sophie was sensitive, artistic, delicate. She needed maternal guidance. There was a pause. The scrape of a chair on hardwood floor. Fine, my father said. His voice was rougher, coated in the dust of blueprint paper and construction sites. Daniel stays with me. Daniel was 18. Daniel was nearly grown, logical, practical. He needed career mentoring in engineering. I held my breath. My hand stopped moving on the tile. I waited for my name. Deborah. I waited for one of them to say it. The silence stretched, pulling thin like old elastic. It was broken only by the sound of papers shuffling, a pen clicking. I waited so long that the silence itself became the answer. I was the line item left blank. I was the to be discussed later. I was the problem nobody wanted to solve. The realization hit my stomach like ice water. My fingers, slick with adhesive, spasmed. The Delft tile slipped from my grasp. It didn't shatter. The antique ceramic was too dense for that. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy final thud and split perfectly in two, right through the windmill. I stared at the two halves. A clean break. My mother was British, a former museum curator who smelled like expensive perfume and old books. She managed chaos by controlling every visible surface of our lives. Our home was a showpiece, a restored Victorian with period-appropriate everything. She had opinions about thread counts and the correct historical paint colors for crown molding. My father was German-American, a civil engineer who smelled like blueprint toner and coffee. He built things that lasted. He valued efficiency, logic, structural integrity. He taught me how to read architectural drawings, how to calculate load-bearing capacity. Measure twice, cut once, he would say. Our house was a careful negotiation between her aesthetic perfectionism and his structural pragmatism. It was beautiful and cold. That night, the careful negotiation was ending. I finally walked downstairs hours later. The quiet was heavier than the shouting had been. The dining room table was covered in documents, neat stacks separated by color-coded tabs. My mother sat on one side, my father on the other. My 10-year-old sister Sophie was crying softly in the corner. My 18-year-old brother Daniel was staring at his phone, his face blank. Nobody looked at me when I entered. I bent down and picked up the two halves of the broken Delft tile from upstairs. I had carried them with me. The ceramic was already getting cold, the edges sharp. It felt heavy in my palm. I slid the pieces into the deep pocket of my cardigan. The sharp edges pressed against my side like a reminder. 3 weeks later, I sat in the Lakeview Juvenile Court. The room smelled like industrial floor polish and old paper, a dry, dusty smell that caught in your throat. The benches were dark wood, polished by years of nervous hands. They reflected the long fluorescent lights overhead, making everything look jaundiced and sick. My mother sat 4 rows ahead of me. My father sat 3 rows behind me. They had lawyers. I had a woman I'd met that morning, a caseworker from Riverbend Family Services named Ms. Catherine Russo. She had kind eyes and carried a heavy file folder with my name on it. The judge was a tired-looking woman with reading glasses. She reviewed the papers without looking up. Reviewing the report from Riverbend Family Services, she said, "Case number 864C. It states here that no party has articulated a specific care plan for the minor Deborah Hall. The distribution of the other children was informal. The minor, Deborah Hall." I felt myself shrink. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a sister. I was the minor, the leftover. The judge finally looked up. Her eyes found mine. "Miss Hall, Deborah, is there anything you would like to say to the court?" My mother stared at her lap. My father checked his phone. My throat was dry. I could feel the sharp edges of the broken tile in my pocket, pressing through the fabric. I swallowed. My voice came out small. "I just want to be somewhere I'm actually wanted." The judge nodded as if I had merely confirmed a fact on a form. She looked back down at her papers. "Thank you, Deborah." The decision was fast. In the absence of a viable plan from either parent, the judge said, "Temporary custody of Deborah Hall is granted to the state. She will be placed in a receiving home with Riverbend Family Services. Effective immediately." The gavel came down, a small, quiet sound. Ms. Russo put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Okay, Deborah, it's time to go." I stood up. My legs felt like they were filled with wet sand. I looked at my mother. She was gathering her papers, her movements precise and controlled. I looked at my father. He was already walking toward the exit, phone to his ear. Neither of them looked back. I followed Ms. Russo out of the courtroom, down a long hallway, into an elevator that smelled like burnt coffee. We walked out into a gray October afternoon. Her car was a standard sedan, beige and anonymous. I climbed into the back seat. As we pulled away from the courthouse, I put my hand in my cardigan pocket. I pulled out one of the tile pieces. It was only half, the back half showing part of the windmill's base. The front half, the one with the detailed mill blades and the tiny painted door, was gone. It must have fallen out somewhere in the courthouse. I stared at the broken piece in my hand. The other half was back there on the floor of that yellow courtroom, probably already swept up by the janitor and thrown away. I watched the courthouse disappear in the rear window, clutching that one broken piece of ceramic so tightly my knuckles turned white. But they had no idea I'd spent the next 16 years documenting every single broken promise, every absence, every moment of calculated neglect. They had no idea that I'd built something from nothing. And they had absolutely no idea that when they came back, I would finally be strong enough to say no. The first placement was with the Hartford family. Their house was a pristine colonial in a development where every lawn was exactly the same height. Mrs. Hartford was thin and brittle, with a smile that never reached her eyes. Mr. Hartford worked in insurance and rarely spoke. They believed in structure. My room was the unfinished basement, which they called the lower guest suite. It had concrete floors, exposed pipes, and a narrow window at ground level. They gave me a cot, a metal dresser, and a small desk lamp. In exchange for the room, I was expected to help with housekeeping. Vacuuming, dishes, laundry folding. Mrs. Hartford didn't ask. She assigned. The chore chart was magnetic, color-coded, posted on the refrigerator where I would see it every morning. I lasted 8 months. The breaking point came on a Saturday in April. I had been working on a tile restoration project, pieces I'd collected from a demolished building near my old high school. I was learning to mix historically accurate grout colors, practicing the techniques my grandmother had taught me before the divorce. I had set up a small workspace in the corner of the basement, carefully organized on newspaper. Mrs. Hartford came downstairs while I was at school. When I came home, everything was gone. The tiles, the grout, the mixing tools, the reference books I'd borrowed from the library, all of it, thrown into the garbage. "It's craft clutter, Deborah," she said when I asked. "This isn't a workshop. It's a home." Ms. Russo came to pick me up 3 days later. "I'm sorry, Deborah," she said in the car. "That wasn't the right fit. We're going to try something different." The second placement changed everything. Grace and Robert Chen lived in a sprawling craftsman house on the edge of town, the kind of place that looked like it had been added onto over generations without a clear plan. The front porch was crowded with pottery in various stages of completion. The driveway had a kiln shed. Through the windows, I could see drafting tables and bookshelves. Grace met me at the door, wiping clay-covered hands on her apron. She was Chinese-American, maybe late 50s, with short, practical hair and laugh lines around her eyes. "Welcome, Deborah. Come in. Watch your step." Robert left his blueprints everywhere again. Robert appeared from a back room, tall and quiet, with silver hair and glasses perched on his head. He was holding a large rolled architectural drawing. "You must be Deborah. Catherine told us about your tile work. We're excited to have another artist in the house." Another artist. Not another chore assignment. Not another project to manage. An artist. My room was on the second floor. It had real furniture, a desk with good light, and an entire wall of empty shelves. "For your work," Grace said simply. "Whatever you need." That first night at dinner, I waited for the rules, the chore chart, the expectations. Instead, Robert asked me about the Delft tile, the one I'd mentioned to Miss Russo. I told him about the windmill, the hairline crack, how it had split when I dropped it. "17th century Dutch tin-glazed earthenware," he said, nodding. "Delicate. High thermal shock sensitivity. You'd need a conservation-grade adhesive, probably an acrylic resin. Do you remember the glaze color?" I did. I remembered everything. "Grace teaches ceramic restoration on Saturdays at the Community Arts Center," Robert said. "If you're interested, she could use an apprentice." That's how it started. Grace taught me everything. Not as a chore, not as therapy, but as a craft. She taught me the chemistry of glazes, the history of ceramic techniques, the patience required to restore something broken. She taught me about kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing pottery with gold lacquer, making the break the most beautiful part of the piece. Robert taught me architectural documentation, how to measure, photograph, and catalog historic buildings, how to read preservation guidelines, how to understand the legal frameworks that protected old structures. He taught me that documentation wasn't paranoia, it was professional practice. My grandmother, Margaret Ashford, had died 2 years before the divorce. She had been a ceramic restorer in England before immigrating to the United States. She left me her entire workshop. Boxes and boxes of tools, reference books, tile samples, and carefully labeled containers of pigments and glazes. My mother had put everything in storage and never mentioned it. Grace helped me retrieve it. We rented a truck and drove to the storage unit my mother had rented in my name, but never given me the code to. Grace called the facility, explained the situation, provided documentation of my legal guardianship. They opened the unit. Inside were 12 boxes, meticulously packed and labeled in my grandmother's spidery handwriting. Delft samples, Victorian tiles, adhesive compounds, reference library, and one box simply labeled, "For Deborah." We brought everything back to the Chen house. That night, I opened the box labeled with my name. Inside was a wooden case of restoration tools, each one wrapped in oiled cloth. At the bottom was an envelope. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter. "My dearest Deborah," it began. "If you are reading this, I am gone, and I hope you have found your way to these tools. I leave them to you because you are the one who sees what is broken and has the patience to make it whole. Your mother sees only what is perfect. Your father sees only what is practical. You see the truth, the cracks, the damage, the story. Never be ashamed of seeing what others ignore. All the broken things are waiting for you. With love, Grandmother Margaret." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the front of my restoration notebook, where it has stayed for 16 years. By the time I was 17, I was apprenticing with Grace at her professional studio. By 18, I was taking my own restoration commissions, small projects at first, a cracked Victorian fireplace surround, a damaged terracotta facade ornament, a shattered antique platter that a family wanted repaired. I developed a system. For every project, I created a documentation file. Photographs from every angle, measurements, material analysis, historical research, treatment notes, before and after images. I cataloged everything. People thought it was excessive. Grace understood it was survival. "You're building a record," she said. "You're proving you were here. You did this work. You made something valuable. That's not excessive. That's professional." When I turned 19, Grace and Robert sat me down at the kitchen table. "We want to adopt you," Grace said. "Not because we feel sorry for you, not because it's charity, because you're ours. You've been ours. We'd like to make it official." I said yes. The legal adoption was finalized on a cold day in November. My mother didn't contest it. My father didn't respond to the notification. Daniel sent a text. Cool, I guess. Sophie didn't reach out at all. I became Deborah Hall Chen. And then, when I started my business and needed a clear professional identity that wouldn't be confused with Grace's studio, I went back to Deborah Hall. But in every document that mattered, in my heart, I was Deborah Chen. I went to State College for Historic Preservation and Architectural Conservation. I worked 3 jobs, saved everything, and graduated with honors and no debt. Grace and Robert came to my graduation. My biological family did not. I started Heritage Ceramics Studio in a rented warehouse space when I was 26. I specialized in historic tile restoration, architectural ceramic repair, and conservation work. My reputation grew slowly, carefully, built on meticulous documentation and reliable craftsmanship. I did work for historical societies, preservation boards, museums, and private collectors. Every project was photographed, cataloged, and archived. Every client received a full report with historical context and treatment details. My files were legendary in the small world of ceramic conservation. By 30, I had enough steady work to hire my first apprentice. By 31, I'd published 2 articles in preservation journals and sat on the board of the Regional Historic Preservation Alliance. And then, last year, I applied for the National Historic Preservation Grant. It was a highly competitive federal grant, worth $750,000, intended to fund comprehensive restoration projects and educational programming. I proposed a 3-year program to restore historic ceramic installations in 6 endangered buildings and to train new craftspeople in traditional techniques. My application was 4 inches thick. Every page documented, photographed, and verified. letters of recommendation from architectural historians, preservation officers, museum curators, my track record of completed projects, my educational credentials, my studio's financial statements. The grant was awarded in March. Heritage Ceramics Studio received full funding for 3 years. The news went out through professional channels first, then filtered into local press. The Harbor Falls Ledger ran a feature in April. From foster care to national recognition, the headline read, "There was a photo of me in my studio, wearing my work apron, holding a restored Victorian tile." The article was accurate, respectful, and included a quote from Dr. Ellen Brightwell, director of the State Historic Preservation Office. "Deborah Hall represents the best of American craftsmanship and resilience," Dr. Brightwell said. "Her work preserves our shared heritage, and her story reminds us that talent and determination transcend circumstance." The article was published on a Thursday. By Saturday, I had 2 certified letters. The first envelope was cream-colored, expensive stationery. The return address was Patricia Ashford Laurent, my mother's current married name. I opened it standing at my studio workbench. "Dear Deborah," it began, "I was so proud to see your recent recognition. It's wonderful that you've found success in restoration work, carrying on your grandmother's legacy. I wonder if we might reconnect. I find myself in need of family support during a difficult financial transition. Perhaps we could meet?" The letter was signed, "With maternal affection, Patricia." Maternal affection, 16 years of silence, and now maternal affection. The second envelope was white, standard business size. The return address was Heinrich Hall, Professional Engineering Consultants, my father's firm. "Deborah," it began, "saw the article. Impressive work. We should discuss a potential partnership. My firm handles several municipal contracts that could benefit from your restoration expertise. Let's set up a meeting to explore how we might work together. The family business, so to speak." It was signed H. Hall. I placed both letters on my desk. I photographed them, front and back. I scanned them into my digital files. I created a new folder. Biological family contact April. I saved everything. Then I called my attorney, James Park, who handled my business contracts. "James," I said, "I think I'm going to need your help with something personal." My mother came to the studio on a Tuesday morning without calling first. I was in the back room, carefully removing damaged grout from a set of 1890s encaustic tiles, when I heard the front door chime. I walked out to the gallery showroom, still wearing my work apron and safety glasses. My mother stood in the center of the room, looking around with the critical eye of a curator evaluating an exhibition. She had aged, of course. 16 years had turned her sharp elegance into something more brittle. Her hair was still perfectly colored, her clothes still expensive and tasteful. But there were lines around her mouth, a tightness in her jaw. Behind her, hesitant and uncomfortable, was my sister Sophie. Sophie was 26 now, no longer the crying 10-year-old from the courthouse. She was thin, blonde like our mother, and dressed in the carefully curated casual style of someone whose Instagram feed was their resume. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Deborah," my mother said, as if we'd spoken last week instead of 16 years ago. "This is lovely, very rustic." She picked up one of my restored tiles from the display shelf, a Victorian transfer print piece with a delicate floral pattern. Charming work. I walked behind the counter, creating a physical barrier. "Hello, Patricia." "Hello, Sophie." Sophie flinched at her own name. "Hi, Deborah," she said softly. My mother set the tile down without looking at the price card. "I received your attorney's response to my letter," she said. "Very formal. I thought perhaps we could discuss the matter in person, as family." "What matter?" I asked. My mother's smile thinned. I explained in my letter. "I'm in a transitional period financially. My current husband and I are investing in a property, A Georgian townhouse in the historic district that requires significant renovation. It's a sound investment, but the bank requires additional security. You want me to co-sign a loan? I said. A family loan, my mother corrected. A small one. 400,000. You have the grant now, the recognition. The bank would accept your studio as collateral. It's just a formality. We would never actually default. It's a guaranteed return. I looked at Sophie. She was staring at her phone, but her hands were shaking slightly. Sophie, I said, do you want to be here? My sister looked up, startled. Mom said, I'm asking you, I said gently. Not her. Do you want to be here? Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. You can wait outside if you want, I said. This is between Patricia and me. My mother's face hardened. Her name is Mom, Deborah. And Sophie is here because this affects her too. She deserves a beautiful home. She deserves to be supported by her family. I took a folder from under the counter. Inside were the letters, my attorney's preliminary notes, and a copy of my grant agreement with the Federal Historic Preservation Office. I had James review your proposal, I said. He explained that if I co-sign and you default, I lose my studio. The grant is tied to this physical location. If I lose the building, I lose the funding. That's not a small formality. That's everything I've built. We wouldn't default, my mother said. Then you don't need me to co-sign. The silence stretched. My mother's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally, calculation. After everything I've done for you, she said quietly, raising you, providing for you. You didn't raise me for the last 16 years, I said. Grace and Robert Chen did. Because you were so independent, my mother snapped. You were always so self-sufficient. You didn't need me the way Sophie did. You were the strong one. There it was. The justification. The story she'd told herself to make abandonment sound like respect. I need 48 hours, I said, to review this properly. Leave your contact information with my assistant and I'll have James send a formal response. I don't have an assistant. But my mother didn't know that. Patricia, I said, 48 hours. She stared at me, waiting for me to crack, to apologize, to become small again. I didn't. I just stood there, calm and professional, behind my counter. She turned sharply and walked out. Sophie followed, but at the door, she turned back. Her eyes met mine, and she mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. Then she was gone. The second confrontation happened at a much more public venue. The Historical Society Spring Benefit was one of the major events in the preservation community calendar. I had been invited to speak on a panel about traditional craftsmanship. I wore my good blazer, prepared my notes, and arrived early. I was standing in the lobby of the beautifully restored 1820s courthouse, reviewing my remarks, when I heard a familiar voice. Deborah. I turned. My father stood 3 feet away, wearing a suit I didn't recognize. He looked older, grayer, more worn. Behind him, polished and corporate in an expensive suit, was my brother Daniel. Dad, I said. Daniel. My brother nodded. Deborah. Good to see you. My father didn't waste time on pleasantries. I understand you received my letter, he said, about the partnership opportunity. I thought we could discuss it here, professional setting and all. This is a historical society benefit, I said. Not a business meeting? Family business, my father corrected. He gestured to Daniel. Dan's reviewed the contract. It's clean, beneficial for both parties. Your restoration expertise, my engineering firm's municipal connections. We could accomplish significant projects together. Daniel pulled a document from his briefcase. I drafted this myself, he said. It's a preferred vendor agreement. You'd become the exclusive restoration contractor for all ceramic and tile work on my engineering projects. 3-year term, guaranteed minimum contract value, It's actually quite generous. I took the document. I didn't open it. I'll have my attorney review it. My father frowned. Your attorney? Deborah, I'm your father. You can trust me. I can trust my attorney to explain the legal implications, I said. I'll send James's response within the week. My father's expression shifted, the warmth evaporating. You know, Deborah, you've become quite cold. This grant has changed you. You used to be reasonable. I used to be 16 and abandoned, I said quietly. Now I'm 32 and careful. Those aren't the same thing. Daniel stepped forward, his voice lower. Deborah, just look at it. It's a good deal. Why are you being difficult? I'm not being difficult, I said. I'm being thorough. There's a difference. I excused myself and went to find a quiet corner to call James. I scanned the contract with my phone and sent it to him. His response came back in 10 minutes. Do not sign this. Call me immediately. I stepped outside. James answered on the first ring. This isn't a partnership, he said. It's a trap. That exclusivity clause gives him control over all your material sourcing and project selection for 3 years. And look at page 4. There's a clause that allows his firm to bill administrative overhead to your grant funding. Deborah, this contract would let him drain your grant while preventing you from taking other work. And the backdating? That's fraudulent. If you signed this, you'd be in violation of federal grant terms. Can they enforce it? I asked. They can try to pressure you, James said. But legally, no. However, if they go public and make noise, it could create problems with your grant oversight. The optics alone could trigger an audit. What do I do? You do nothing, James said. I'll send both of them formal responses. Cease and desist letters. Make it clear any further contact constitutes harassment. I went back inside. I gave my panel presentation. I smiled, answered questions, and networked with colleagues. But the entire time I could feel my father and brother watching me from across the room. The campaign began in earnest after that. My mother called daily, leaving voicemails that started warm and turned progressively colder. Deborah, darling, please call me back. We need to discuss this sensibly. And then, Deborah, I don't understand why you're being so stubborn. This is family. And finally, Deborah, Sophie is devastated. You're abandoning her just like you abandoned us. My father sent letters. Official-looking correspondence on his firm's letterhead. Final notice. Legal review pending. Breach of familial obligation. Each one more threatening than the last. Sophie posted on Instagram. Cryptic quotes. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you hurt you the most. Success changes people. Her followers, 200,000 strong, flooded the comments with sympathy. Daniel sent emails. Short, frustrated, corporate. Why are you doing this? Just sign the contract. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You've always been stubborn. I documented everything. Every voicemail saved and transcribed. Every letter scanned and filed. Every Instagram post screenshot and archived. Every email printed and organized chronologically. James sent the cease and desist letters. I thought that would be the end. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Dr. Ellen Brightwell, director of the State Historic Preservation Office. Deborah, she said. Her voice was careful, concerned. We've received some inquiries about your grant. Questions about your professional relationships and potential conflicts of interest. From whom? I asked. Anonymous, she said, but detailed. Someone knows your family history and is suggesting there may be issues with how you're managing grant funds. My heart went cold. There aren't any issues. I know, Dr. Brightwell said. I've reviewed your files personally. Everything is impeccable. But the accusations have been made formally, which means I'm required to request a full financial review. It's procedural, But it will take time and resources. Who would do this? Dr. Brightwell was quiet for a moment. Someone who wants to damage your reputation, she said, or someone who wants to pressure you into something. The same day, the local newspaper received an anonymous tip. I know because a reporter called me. Ms. Hall, we've been told that you're refusing to help your elderly mother facing medical debt. Can you comment? I referred them to James. He sent a statement. Ms. Hall maintains appropriate professional boundaries. She has offered substantial assistance through proper legal and social service channels. Any suggestion of abandonment is false and defamatory. The pressure was working. I could feel it like a vice tightening around my chest. Grace called me every evening. Talk to me, she said. Tell me what you're feeling. I'm angry, I told her. I'm furious. They left me. They didn't speak to me for 16 years. And now they're trying to destroy everything I've built because I won't give them money. You don't owe them anything, Grace said. I know. So why do you sound guilty? Because, I said, and my voice cracked. Because I'm afraid if I say no, I'm proving them right. That I'm cold. That I'm ungrateful. That success changed me into someone cruel. Oh, honey, Grace said. Saying no to people who abandoned you isn't cruel. It's survival. You're not cold. You're protecting what you built. There's a difference. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night. I was working late in the studio, finishing documentation on a rush project, when my phone rang. It was Isabel Santos, my best friend from the foster care days. She was a social worker now, one of the good ones. Deborah, she said, I'm at County General. Grace is here. My heart stopped. What happened? She's okay, Isabel said quickly. She's okay. But she had chest pains. Robert brought her in. They think it's stress-induced. Maybe anxiety. She's stable. But Deborah, she kept talking about you. About some family situation. She's worried about you. I drove to the hospital in a blur. I found Robert in the waiting room, his face gray with exhaustion. She's going to be fine, he said. But this stress, Deborah, what's happening? I told him everything. The letters, the demands, the threats, the campaign to damage my reputation, Grace's fierce protection of me, the toll it was taking. Robert listened quietly. Then he asked, what would you tell one of Isabel's foster kids in this situation? I stared at him. I'd tell them to document everything and say no. Then why aren't you taking your own advice? Because, I said, and stopped. Because I didn't have an answer. Isabel found us in the waiting room. She sat down next to me. Deborah, she said, these people abandoned you. They didn't raise you. They didn't support you. They didn't choose you. And now they want your money? Your success. Your name attached to their schemes. You know what that is? What? Parasitic behavior, she said flatly. And you know what the treatment is? Boundaries. Hard, documented, legally enforced boundaries. I sat in that hospital waiting room, watching Robert hold Grace's hand through the window of her room, and I made a decision. I would not negotiate. I would not explain. I would not justify. I would simply refuse. And I would make sure everyone, the grant board, the press, the historical society, heard exactly why. I spent 3 days preparing, not emotionally preparing, strategically preparing. I wasn't going into this fight with feelings. I was going in with evidence. I started with my archives, 16 years of documentation, organized chronologically in fireproof file boxes in my studio basement. I pulled everything. Box 1, years 16 to 18, every missed birthday. Every school event where the parent attendance line remained blank next to my name. Every holiday I spent with foster families or alone. Every letter I'd written that went unanswered. I had kept everything. School programs with empty seats circled. Birthday cards I'd made myself. A journal from my first year at the Hartford house, documenting the isolation. Photographs of that basement room. Box 2. Years 18 to 21. My adoption paperwork with Grace and Robert. The legal notification sent to my biological parents. My father's one-line response, no objection. My mother's certified letter that returned unopened with return to sender written in her handwriting. College graduation announcement sent and never acknowledged. Box 3, years 21 to present. Professional correspondence. Every time my work was featured in a publication or exhibition, every award, every grant, every milestone. I had sent announcements to both parents, keeping meticulous records. 0 responses until last month. And then, the recent campaign. Every voicemail transcribed, every letter scanned, every Instagram post archived, every threatening email printed. I had it all, time-stamped and organized. But that wasn't the revelation. That was just the foundation. The revelation came when I went through my grandmother's papers again. Grace had helped me retrieve the boxes from storage when I was 17, but I hadn't gone through every document carefully. I'd been too young, too overwhelmed. Now I spread everything out on my studio floor and read every page. My grandmother's will was straightforward. Her restoration tools, her reference library, and a small savings account all left to me. But attached to the will was a handwritten letter, not the one addressed to me. This one was addressed to her attorney. Please ensure, my grandmother had written, that Patricia understands this inheritance goes to Deborah alone. Patricia has repeatedly refused to assist with my care or maintain contact during my illness, citing her own financial priorities. She has demonstrated she values my estate, but not my person. Deborah has visited faithfully, despite Patricia's attempts to prevent these visits. Deborah has earned this inheritance through love and attention. Patricia has forfeited any claim through neglect. I read it 3 times. Then I pulled the executor's financial documents. My grandmother's estate had been divided, the restoration workshop and tools to me. Everything else, including the sale of her cottage and its contents, went into a trust. The trust was divided equally between my mother and father, as her surviving daughter and son-in-law. The amount was substantial. Each of them had received $175,000. They had inherited money, significant money, and they had never told me. I called James Park. "I need you to run some financial records," I said. "What am I looking for?" I gave him the details, the dates of the inheritance distribution, the approximate amounts, my parents' names. James called back in 4 hours. "Deborah," he said, "your mother received her inheritance in 2 installments in 2010 and 2011. Public records show she purchased a vacation property in 2011 and sold it at a loss in 2014. Your father received his portion in 2010. He invested it in expanding his engineering firm. The expansion failed. He declared business bankruptcy in 2016. They spent it," I said. "They spent it poorly," James corrected. "And now they want yours." The power shift was immediate once I understood. This wasn't about family. It wasn't about reconciliation or support. This was about 2 people who had mismanaged their own inheritance and wanted to control mine. I called an emergency meeting with Dr. Brightwell from the Historic Preservation Office. I drove to her office in the state capitol with a box of documentation. "Dr. Brightwell," I said, "I need to disclose a situation that may affect my grant." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I'm listening." "I'm being pressured by my biological parents," I said. "They abandoned me at age 16. I had no contact with them until last month, when my grant was announced. Since then, they have demanded I co-sign loans and enter into fraudulent business contracts that would violate grant terms." I laid out the documentation, the letters, the demands. James's legal analysis showing both schemes violated federal nonprofit regulations. The anonymous complaints filed with her office. The timeline proving the connection. Dr. Brightwell read everything in silence. Then she looked up. Her expression wasn't sympathetic. It was fierce. Do you know why I recommended your grant, Deborah? Because of my work? Partially, she said. But also because I was a foster kid too. I didn't put that in my professional bio, but it's true. I aged out at 18 with nothing. I know what it takes to build something from that foundation. And I know predators when I see them. She picked up her phone. I'm calling our legal team. This is harassment of a grant recipient. We're going to document this formally and make it clear to anyone who inquires that you are fully compliant and under our institutional protection. The Grant Foundation didn't just maintain my funding, they increased oversight to protect me. They issued a formal statement. Ms. Hall's grant is in full compliance with federal regulations. Recent inquiries appear to be part of a coordinated harassment campaign. We stand behind Ms. Hall's work and professional integrity. James sent updated cease and desist letters, this time with teeth. Further contact will be considered harassment of a federally funded professional and may result in criminal charges. But I wasn't done. The truth needed to be told completely. Isabel called me. Deborah, she said, I have an idea. It's a little unorthodox. I'm listening. Let me share your story on LinkedIn, not the emotional parts, the factual parts. Social worker documenting a case study in family exploitation of professional success. I won't use your parents' names, but the pattern needs to be visible. I thought about it. Do it, I said. Isabel's post was clinical and devastating. She outlined, without names, a case study of a professional foster care graduate being pressured by biological parents who had abandoned her. She detailed the timeline, the 16 years of silence, the sudden contact after professional recognition, the escalating demands, the attempts to damage reputation when demands were refused. The post went viral in the social work and nonprofit communities. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments from other foster care alumni with similar experiences. And then, unexpectedly, Sophie responded. Not publicly, privately. She sent me an email. Deborah, it began. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about grandmother's inheritance, about the money they got. Mom told me they were broke because of the divorce. She told me you were angry and vindictive. She told me you abandoned us. I've been reading about you, your work, your studio. I saw Isabel's post and I recognized the timeline. It's about us, isn't it? About Mom and Dad. I'm so sorry. I should have looked for you. I should have questioned the story. I was 10 and scared, and I believed what I was told. I'm 26 now, and I have no excuse. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know I'm sorry. And I'm proud of you, even if I have no right to be. I read the email 3 times. Then I wrote back, Sophie, thank you. I appreciate this. I'm glad you're okay. If you ever want to talk, without parental mediation, I'm open to that. But on our timeline, not theirs. Be well. The final confrontation came from my father's side. He called my studio directly, bypassing James's cease and desist. He didn't sound angry. He sounded desperate. Deborah, please. Just listen. The firm is failing. I need this contract. I need you to sign it. It's not fraud. Dan made a mistake in the drafting. We can fix it. Please. I'm your father. No, I said calmly. You're the man who provided genetic material. You're the man who chose Daniel over me at age 16 and never looked back. You're the man who received inheritance from my grandmother and spent it on a business expansion you couldn't sustain. You are not my father. Robert Chen is my father. And the answer is no. There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. You'll regret this. I don't think I will, I said, and I hung up. 20 minutes later, James called. Deborah, your father just posted something on social media. He's claiming you defrauded him in a business deal and stole family inheritance. Screenshot it, I said. Add it to the file. That's defamation. We'll handle it. We did handle it. James sent a formal defamation notice with a threat of lawsuit. The post came down in 6 hours. I scheduled one final meeting. Not with my parents. With the people who mattered. I invited Grace and Robert, Isabel, James, and Dr. Brightwell to my studio on a Saturday morning. I'd prepared coffee and pastries from the bakery down the street. I set up my laptop and projector. I need to tell you something, I said. All of you have protected me through this. You've given me legal support, institutional backing, emotional strength. You've been my family. I want to show you why I documented everything. Why I kept every record. I showed them the timeline. 16 years, laid out month by month. The absences, the silence, the inheritance, the sudden contact, the escalating demands, the threats. This isn't about me being unforgiving, I said. This is about me refusing to be exploited. I'm not cold. I'm documented. There's a difference. Dr. Brightwell stood up. She walked to the projection screen showing my grandmother's letter, the one explaining the inheritance division. She read it aloud. Then she turned to me. Deborah, she said, you have every right to refuse. More than that, you have an ethical obligation to refuse. These people are trying to violate federal grant terms. They're trying to commit fraud. Your refusal isn't personal. It's professional. Grace hugged me. We're proud of you, she said. Not because you said no, because you knew when to say no. That afternoon, I wrote one final document, a formal statement to be delivered to my biological parents by registered mail. To Patricia Ashford Laurent and Heinrich Hall, it began. This letter is my final communication regarding your recent demands for financial assistance and business partnership. I am declining both requests. This decision is final and not subject to negotiation. You have claimed I am abandoning family. I must correct this assertion. You are not my family. You are biological relatives who legally surrendered parental rights when I was 16 years old. Grace and Robert Chen are my family. They chose me. They raised me. They supported me. They earned that title. You received substantial inheritance from my grandmother, Margaret Ashford. At the same time, she left me her tools and her workshop. You spent your inheritance. That is not my responsibility to repair. My professional success is the result of 16 years of work, education, and careful planning. It is not a resource for you to exploit. I have provided you with contact information for legitimate financial counseling, bankruptcy attorneys, and social services. Those resources remain available. What is not available is my signature, my collateral, or my professional reputation. Any further contact will be considered harassment and will be addressed through legal channels. I wish you clarity in your financial situations. I wish you no ill, but I wish you no role in my life. Deborah Hall. I sent it certified mail. Return receipt requested. I kept copies of everything. They both signed for the letters. Neither responded. The revelation wasn't just that they wanted my money. It was that they genuinely believed I owed it to them. They had spent 16 years believing I was fine, that I was the strong one, that I didn't need them. They had built an entire narrative where their abandonment was actually respect for my independence. And when I became successful, they saw it as validation. Of course she's successful. She was always so capable. We knew she'd be fine. They wanted credit for my success and access to its benefits. They wanted to be right about me, while also profiting from me. I didn't give them either. The consequences came swiftly, but not from me. I didn't have to destroy my biological parents. They destroyed themselves. Patricia's loan request had been time-sensitive. The investment property she'd been trying to purchase with my collateral fell through when she couldn't secure financing. She lost her deposit, substantial money from her current husband. The marriage, already strained, fractured. I heard through Grace's network that Patricia's third husband filed for divorce 6 months later. Sophie moved out of her mother's house and into a small apartment. She started therapy. She sent me occasional emails, careful and respectful, never asking for anything. Just updates, just connection. I took the subway today and thought of you. I remember you used to love old tile work in the stations. I'm starting to see it too. I responded when I felt ready. Sometimes weeks later. Sometimes just a few words. I'm glad you're seeing it. Keep looking. Heinrich's engineering firm couldn't survive without the municipal contracts he'd been counting on. The firm he'd tried to force me into partnership with declared bankruptcy within a year. He took a salaried position at a competitor's firm, a significant step down in prestige and control. Daniel finally confronted him. I know because Daniel called me, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I reviewed the contract, he said. The one I drafted. Dad told me it was standard. But James was right. It was fraudulent. I could lose my license for drafting that. Dad put my career at risk for his failing business. I'm sorry, I said. You have nothing to be sorry for, Daniel said. I should have protected you when we were kids. I was 18. I could have fought for you. I didn't. That's on me. We weren't close. We probably never would be. But it was something. My studio continued to thrive. The grant funded exactly what I'd proposed. Restoration work on 6 endangered buildings. Educational programming for new craftspeople. I hired 3 apprentices, all from foster care backgrounds. I created the Margaret Ashford Fellowship, funded separately from my grant, for young people in care interested in historic preservation and traditional crafts. The fellowship provided materials, tools, mentorship, and a small stipend. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Maya, who'd been shuttled through 4 placements in 2 years. She was angry and brilliant, and had been sketching architectural details in her notebook since she was 12. You can't save me, she told me on our first meeting. I'm a mess. I don't want to save you, I said. I want to teach you to mix grout and read architectural drawings. The rest is up to you. She's still with me. She's 19 now, and she's better at color-matching historical glazes than I am. The regional historic preservation community recognized the fellowship program. I received the Craftsman Legacy Award at the annual conference. Dr. Brightwell presented it. Deborah Hall represents the best of our field, she said in her presentation. Technical excellence, historical integrity, and a commitment to passing knowledge to the next generation. She proves that broken things can be made whole. That includes people. I didn't cry at the podium. I saved that for later, in Grace and Robert's living room, the 3 of us on the couch, the award on the coffee table. I'm proud of you, Robert said. Not because of the award, because you stood up for yourself. You didn't just stand up, Grace added. You documented, you prepared, and you protected what you built. That's not cold. That's strength. 1 year after the confrontations, I made a decision. Grace and Robert had adopted me legally when I was 19, but it had been a quiet courthouse ceremony, just paperwork. I wanted something more. I asked if they would be willing to have an adoption celebration, a real one, at the studio, with our community. They said yes immediately. We held it on a Saturday in September. The studio was filled with people, Isabel and her family, Maya and the other apprentices, Dr. Brightwell and colleagues from the preservation community, members of the foster care alumni network, James Park, who'd become more than an attorney, a real friend. We didn't have a ceremony. We just had a gathering. Grace made her famous dumplings. Robert set up his photography equipment and took portraits. People toured the studio, asked questions about the restoration work, admired the tile installations. In the center of the main gallery, I'd installed a new piece. It was a large mosaic, 3 feet by 4 feet, mounted on the wall under gallery lighting. The design was abstract, a pattern of broken ceramic pieces in blues and grays, all held together with visible gold resin seams. At the bottom, a small brass plaque read, "Inheritance," created by Deborah Hall Chen, in memory of Margaret Ashford, who taught me that broken things have value. Sophie came. She'd called first, asked permission, offered to stay away if it would be easier. I told her she could come. She arrived quietly, stayed at the edges, didn't push for attention. Near the end of the evening, she approached me, holding a small wrapped package. "I found this at an estate sale," she said. "I thought you might like it." I opened it carefully. Inside was a single antique Delft tile, late 17th century, showing a windmill scene. It was in perfect condition. "I know it's not the one you broke," Sophie said, "but I remember you loved those. I've been looking for one for months." "No strings, Deborah. Just sorry. Just, I remember you." I looked at the tile, the windmill, the careful blue and white glaze, the weight of history in my hand. "Thank you, Sophie." She left soon after. We weren't rebuilt. We might never be. But it was something. The final piece of closure came on a random Tuesday. I received a letter. Formal legal letterhead. It was from my father's attorney, demanding I retract false statements and compensate Heinrich Hall for defamation and business losses. I called James. He read it and laughed. "This is a joke," he said. "They have no case." "Do you want me to respond?" "No," I said. "Don't respond at all. File it. Let them wonder." They never followed up. It was just noise. A last desperate attempt to assert control. I didn't need to respond. I'd already said everything that mattered. 6 months later, Architectural Digest featured my studio in their restoration issue. The photos were beautiful. My workshop, the kilns, the carefully organized tile samples, the apprentices working on a Victorian fireplace surround. The article was titled, "Deborah Hall, Restoring More Than Buildings." The writer had done her research. She mentioned my foster care background, the fellowship program, the national grant. She quoted Dr. Brightwell and Grace. She described my documentation practices and meticulous approach. And then, near the end, a paragraph that made me stop breathing. When asked about her philosophy of restoration, Hall shows me a piece in her personal collection. It's a small fragment of antique ceramic, its broken edge sealed with gold resin. She keeps it on her desk. A reminder. People think restoration is about making things look like they were never broken, Hall explains. But that's not restoration. That's erasure. Real restoration acknowledges the damage and makes it part of the story. The break is where the light gets in. They'd photographed my desk. And there, visible in the corner of the image, was the piece of the original Delft tile, the one I'd carried out of the courthouse 16 years ago. The back half of the windmill, its broken edge now sealed in gold. I ordered 20 copies of the magazine. I sent one to Sophie with a note. Still broken, still whole, still here. I sent one to Isabel with a note. Thank you for teaching me the vocabulary of boundaries. I sent one to James with a note. Thank you for translating my no into legal language. I sent one to Dr. Brightwell with a note. Thank you for standing with me. I kept one for myself. I framed the page with the photograph of my desk and hung it in my office. The last copy I sent to Ms. Catherine Russo, my original caseworker from Riverbend Family Services, the woman who'd driven me away from the courthouse in that beige sedan. I'd tracked her down through Isabel's network. She was retired now, living in Florida. She called me when she received it. "Deborah," she said. Her voice was older but still kind. "I remember you. I remember that day. I wanted you to know I'm okay," I said. "Better than okay. I wanted to say thank you." "You did this," Ms. Russo said. "Not me. You survived. You built something. That was all you." "No," I said. "You drove me to the Chen house. You could have placed me anywhere. You chose them. That mattered." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad," she said finally. "I'm so glad. I teach a workshop now. Every Saturday at the studio. It's called Broken Things Made Whole. It's open to anyone, but it's designed specifically for young people from foster care, from difficult backgrounds, from broken places. We work with ceramic tiles, teaching basic restoration techniques, cleaning, adhesive application, grout mixing, sealing. We talk about history, about preservation, about why old things matter. But really, we talk about ourselves. Last Saturday, a 16-year-old named Jasmine held up a cracked Victorian tile. "Can I throw this away and start with a good one?" she asked. "You could," I said. "But then you'd just have a tile. If you repair this one, you'll have a story." "What's the difference?" she asked. I showed her my desk piece, the gold-sealed fragment. "This was broken in a courthouse the day I went into foster care," I said. "I've carried it for 16 years. It's not beautiful because it's perfect. It's beautiful because it survived." Jasmine looked at her cracked tile with new eyes. "Okay," she said. "Teach me how to fix it." I opened my kit of tools, the ones my grandmother left me, the ones I'd carried through 2 foster placements and built a career around. "First," I said, "we document the damage. We photograph it, measure it, understand exactly what broke and why. Then we clean the edges. Then we choose our adhesive. And finally, we make the repair visible, not hidden." "Why visible?" Jasmine asked. "Because," I said, "hiding the break doesn't make you whole. It just makes you look whole. There's a difference." She nodded slowly. She picked up her tile. "Okay," she said. "Let's start. I am Deborah Hall. I was the daughter left behind, the one nobody wanted, the surplus. I was placed in foster care at 16 by parents who chose my siblings and forgot my name. 16 years later, those same parents returned, wanting money, wanting partnership, wanting to attach themselves to the success I'd built without them. I said no. Not because I'm cold, not because I'm unforgiving, not because success changed me, but because I finally understood something my grandmother tried to teach me with those restoration tools. You don't owe repair to the people who broke you. You owe it to yourself. I learned that being called the strong one is not a compliment when it's used to justify abandonment. I learned that documentation is not paranoia, it's professional practice and survival. I learned that chosen family is not second best, it's intentional love. And I learned that no is a complete sentence, especially when it protects the life you've built from the people who abandoned you to build it alone. I have a studio full of broken tiles, each one carefully repaired, each break visible and sealed in gold. I have apprentices learning to do the same work. I have a fellowship named for my grandmother, teaching others that broken things have value. I have Grace and Robert, who chose me when I was 16 and angry, and carrying a piece of broken ceramic in my pocket like a talisman of abandonment. They saw past the damage to the person I could become with the right tools and the right support. I have Sophie, tentatively reaching across 16 years of silence, learning to see me instead of the story she was told. I have Isabel, Dr. Brightwell, James, Maya, and dozens of others who understand that family is built, not assigned. And I have myself, 32 years old, silver streak in my hair, hands always stained with grout, carrying my grandmother's tools and her lesson forward. The break is where the light gets in. But you have to seal the edges first. You have to make yourself whole. And sometimes, making yourself whole means saying no to the people who broke you in the first place. If this story resonated with you, if you were ever the strong one who got left behind, if you've ever had to say no to people who only remembered you when they needed something, if you've built a life from broken pieces, please share this story. Leave a comment telling me, what would you say to your 16-year-old self? What did you have to learn to say no to? Let's build a community of people who understand that saying no to the wrong people is how you finally say yes to yourself. Subscribe, like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you don't owe repair to the people who broke you. You owe it to yourself. The best revenge is not living well, it's living truthfully. And the truth is, broken things don't need to be hidden. They need to be sealed, strengthened, and celebrated. You are not leftover. You are not surplus. You are the inheritance you give yourself.